credit requirements require students to earn 1/4 credit for every semester they're enrolled in a New York State high school. So there is some flexibility for students who enter a New York State high school from out of state school, where they do need to earn just that 1/4 credit, not just, but the 1/4 credit for every semester they're here in New York State. So physical education is the only instance where students might graduate with fewer than 22 credits. And that is if they entered from an out of state school and needed to fulfill a lesser number of PE credits, or if they accelerated their graduation and let's say they graduated at the end of their junior year, they wouldn't need to fulfill that 2 credit requirement. They could graduate with the 1.5 credits for the 1/4 credit every semester they're here. A lot of times we get questions about electives. What are elective courses? So an elective course is any credit-bearing course that is not needed to fulfill the other distribution requirements. And here you see the chart kind of outlining the physical education credit requirements, where students have to earn that 1/4 credit for every semester they're enrolled in a New York State high school. Most often, the unit of credit is earned through the successful completion of a unit of study. And that requires a minimum of 180 minutes of instruction per week or the equivalent. That is not an attendance requirement. That's a requirement of the school to provide instruction for that number of minutes. And then in order for students to earn the credit, they must demonstrate their mastery of the learning outcomes for the course. And exactly how that mastery is demonstrated and the grade that a student must earn to earn credit, those decisions are locally determined by each school or district. Students can also earn credit via credit by exam. Students can earn a maximum of 6.5 credits via credit by exam, in which case the superintendent determines that that option would benefit the student if they can sit for the Regents exam, and then if they score an 85 or above on that Regents exam, and also complete a locally developed oral exam or special project, they can earn credit in that way as well. And then you see the other options for earning credit. So grade 8 acceleration, independent study, participation in the performance arts, transfer credit, summer school, and makeup course credit. And I'll share these slides with you when I'm finished, but all of these link right to the regulations, which have all the details for how the credit can be earned. We get a lot of questions about awarding of transfer credit. So if the student is transferring from one registered New York State high school to another, the principal must grant credit for any course where credit was previously awarded. Likewise, if the student is transferring in from a state agency where the educational officer has attested that the student has earned credit, the school must award that credit as well. And then if in all other cases, if the student is transferring from another educational or cultural institution, the principal would review the coursework along with relevant faculty. So if they're looking at an English course, they would bring in their English educators and determine whether or not to award that transfer credit. And that decision is based on whether or not the work that was done in the other school or institution is comparable to that which would have been done in their high school. If it is, they can award that transfer credit. Before we swing into the assessment requirements, are there any questions? Okay. The last thing I see in the chat is a smiley face, so I'm hoping that's a good sign. Don't hesitate to stop me if you do have questions throughout too. So our assessment requirements now follow the multiple pathways or 4+1 pathway model. So all students have to pass those 4 required assessments, 1 in each discipline. So 1 English, 1 math, 1 science, 1 social studies, Regents exam, or department approved alternative. And the department approved alternatives are a list of alternatives that were approved by the state education department. So these aren't locally approved assessments, they're approved by the SED. And then students can fulfill that 5th assessment requirement using any one of the pathway options. We do currently have 6 pathways available to all students. The civic readiness pathway is the 7th pathway, which is currently being piloted. So any of the students that are enrolled in those pilot schools would be able to earn that pathway this year. Moving forward, it will be available to all schools. So this slide kind of organizes the pathways into buckets. So in orange, you see pathways can be obtained by passing an additional Regents exam or department approved alternative. And that's true for the humanities and the STEM pathways. So if a student passes an additional Regents exam in social studies, science, or math, they can use that additional exam to meet that 5th assessment requirement. And likewise, if a student passes an additional department approved alternative in English, social studies, science, or math, they too could use that to fulfill the 5th assessment requirement. In yellow, we have our department approved pathway assessments. We currently have 3 disciplines where we have department approved pathway assessments. That's the arts, world languages, and career development and occupational studies. And as long as a student earns a passing score on one of those assessments, they can use that to fulfill that 5th assessment requirement. In green, you have the more programmatic pathways. So the first one is the CTE pathway. If a student completes a NYSET approved CTE program, and that includes the 3-part technical assessment at the end of that program, they can use that to fulfill the pathway requirement. If a student earns the CDOS commencement credential, they can use that to fulfill the 5th assessment requirement. We'll talk more about the CDOS in a minute here. And then students can, in those pilot schools, can also use the Seal of Civic Readiness as the 5th assessment requirement.
Melissa, just a
Yes.
quick question before we move on about the Seal of Civic Readiness for next year.
Yeah.
Is it correct that schools need, they need to apply to be able to offer it?
Yes,
And there's a kind of a deadline to do that for next year?
that's correct. And that is in a slide coming up here.
Oh, okay.
So slide 16, and it does link to that, the application guidance, and they are due by August 1st.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, so CDOS is unique that it can serve multiple roles. It really can serve 4 different roles. It can be used as a pathway to a diploma. It can be earned in addition to a diploma, and it can be earned as a standalone exiting credential. So for both the pathway to the diploma and earned in addition to the diploma, the students are earning those 22 units of credit. They're passing the 4 disciplinary assessments, 1 in English, 1 in math, 1 in science, 1 in social studies. And if it's used as a pathway, they're using that completion of the CDOS to fulfill that 5th assessment requirement. In orange, earned in addition to a diploma, they've completed another pathway other than the CDOS, but also successfully completed the commencement credential requirements. And there they're earning it in addition to a diploma. And then finally, as a standalone exiting credential, the student has attempted but wasn't able to successfully complete all the Regents or local diploma requirements, but they did complete the CDOS commencement credential requirements. They may exit with that as a standalone exiting credential. We do want to make sure that schools and families know that students should never be tracked towards earning the CDOS as an exiting credential only. It is there for them if needed, but we shouldn't be tracking kids to earn the CDOS exclusively as an exiting credential. So there are 2 options, as you noticed in the earlier slide, for the CDOS commencement credential. Option 1 is that more programmatic option. Students must complete a career plan and employability profile within a year of their graduation, and they must demonstrate their achievement of the CDOS learning standards. And they're doing that through a minimum of 216 hours of CTE coursework, which must include at least 54 hours of work-based learning. All 216 hours could be work-based learning experiences, but they must have that minimum of 54 hours. And the graphic on the right serves to show what type of CTE coursework could be included in those hours. A lot of times we think of CTE coursework as the work that is done at the BOCES, but it is not only that. So CTE coursework can be any coursework done either through the school or district or through a BOCES that addresses any of the CTE disciplines. So for example, if a student earned a credit in a business course and a credit in a family and consumer science course, as long as they had at least 54 hours of work-based learning and also completed a career plan and employability profile within a year of their graduation, they could use those courses to fulfill the CDOS and to earn the CDOS commencement credential. And then they could use it as a pathway or in addition to their diploma. Our CTE office has updated their webpage, and there are a lot of resources if needed related to work-based learning and the CDOS as well. And then option 2 for earning the CDOS requires students to earn an acceptable score on a department-approved pathway assessment in CDOS. So you see the list of assessments that are currently approved. And this also links to that list as well, which includes the cut scores. Actually, let me check that, because for the CDOS, the scores are set by the vendors themselves. So I don't think this document actually does include cut scores. For those pilot schools that are earning the Seal of Civic Readiness, they can use that as a pathway this school year. Beginning next year, it will be available to all the schools that do apply. And students are earning the Seal of Civic Readiness through their demonstration of civic knowledge and civic participation. So there's a menu that students and schools can choose from in order to demonstrate that civic knowledge and civic participation. Students have to earn at least 2 points in each of those areas, with a total of 6 points overall. And if they're able to do that, they've earned the Seal of Civic Readiness. So it includes things like passing Regents exams, mastery of Regents exams, so they have different point values for those, and completing projects like civic research projects, capstone projects. And our Seal of Civic Readiness Initiative webpage has a lot of information about the seal if you're interested in sharing that forward. So we do have the individual arts assessment pathway, which will be piloted beginning in September of 2022. And I know one of your questions was related to the coursework that would be included in this. So the current arts pathway relies on passing scores on AP or IB exams in the arts. And we recognize that not all students may have access to those courses. So the individual arts assessment pathway, or the IAP, intends to serve a broader range of students and to provide more students with the arts pathway option. So it is more locally governed, if you will. So the IAP will be based on a collection of student work that demonstrates their growth in the arts over time. They must meet at least the high school 2 accomplished level in the New York State Learning Standards for the Arts. And they're doing that through the completion of at least 3 credits in the arts. And then they're creating a portfolio. And if they earn a passing score on that portfolio and successfully earn those 3 credits, then they will earn the IAP, or the individual arts assessment pathway.
So it is true that a school could say, we don't offer that one here.
It is, yes. Okay. Yeah. So schools have to offer their students pathways to earn the diploma types, but they don't necessarily have to offer every single option.
Are some prescribed that they do need to offer and some optional, or it's really just up to the local district?
It's up to the local district and the resources that they have available to them.
Melissa, for the CDOS pathway, it was always my understanding that the schools did need to offer option 1, but the pathway assessments was not necessarily something that they had to offer. Is that still correct?
Well, the CDOS learning standards are for all students. So schools should be offering coursework that teaches those from K to 12. I'm not sure. I know that schools should not be relying on just option 2 for CDOS, but let me double check on that. So I think it should, I think you are correct.
Thank
But
you.
let me
I
just double
appreciate
check.
that.
I'll just verify that for sure. Because I'm pretty sure that is in the CDOS FAQ that schools should not only be relying on option 2.
Correct. Unfortunately, they don't always have the coursework for the CDOS learning standards, which enables them to meet option 1, which is a stumbling block for many.
Okay,
And so I just want to
Interesting.
make sure I understand. So district, they're required to offer options, but which ones and how many are kind of up to them.
yes, that's correct. Yeah, all the decisions related to what courses are offered in a district are locally determined. So, for example, some districts are not offering physics, and others are. So those decisions are locally determined based on their resources. Any other questions before we move on?
No, just a comment. I mean, I saw your reaction to my question about the
I know,
availability
it's
of the
surprising
coursework,
to me.
and it's really very common knowledge to those of us who work in transition. And unfortunately, it's primarily a result of the push for college and career readiness being on college and trying to get the students through the Regents curriculum. And what I was always told for 10 years as a specialist working with the schools before I came up to Cornell to become an associate was, we used to have those courses, but we got rid of them because of the Regents. So I see Erica nodding her head because she used to live in the same world that I did. And I
Yes,
don't think that those things have changed. And that's one of the pieces that makes it particularly difficult for students to, or for specialists to work with schools to encourage them to offer that pathway, since it is required, as far as I know,
right.
and not have the availability of the courses that would help students meet that pathway. So thank you.
Do you think it's possible that they're not realizing which courses could be used to meet the CDOS requirements?
I do believe that that's part of it, but it's
Mhm.
also the part that the CTE coursework needs to be provided by a CT certified instructor.
Yeah,
And that's not always the case.
right.
So they might be offering the courses, but if the teacher isn't certified in CTE, then that class doesn't count.
Yeah.
But
And I
the
think-
business courses, I'm sorry, Erica, the business courses and things of that nature, are things, and, financial literacy, which is huge for our kids and really
Yes.
something that's needed for everybody, are the things that in my experience have gone by the wayside because of the focus on getting them through the 5 core regions that you identified earlier.
Yeah, and we heard the value of financial literacy and the need for it in the graduation measures regional meetings, especially from the students. So I think our eyes are open to that, and hopefully that change will come with that grad measures initiative.
That's great to hear.
Our kids need it sooner.
I mean, really, that affects 2 pathways, right? It affects that CTE pathway and the CDOS pathway. So if they don't have that CTE certified teacher, that their students are missing on 2 pathway
Right,
options.
2 options, yeah.
And we won't even discuss how the teacher shortages that are presently going on are impacting all of that and making it an even more difficult situation.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Anything else before we move on? Thank you for your conversation. All right, so this just highlights the 3 diploma types. So we currently do have the local, the Regents, and the Regents with advanced designation. All 3 are dependent on the same credit requirements. And the difference between the local and the regions are the scores that are used to meet the assessment requirements. So if a student earns passing scores, and now we have to have multiple asterisks here, because remember, exemptions can be counted in lieu of a passing score. And now we have the special appeal option, which allows students to appeal scores in that 50 to 64 range. But if a student has met the assessment requirements for the 4+1 without the use of the traditional appeals or safety nets that would lead to the local diploma, then they would earn that Regents diploma. And then the third option for the local diploma is that superintendent determination option, which we'll talk more about those as we move forward here. And then we have the Regents with advanced designation, which again relies on the 22 units of credit. And now students must pass an additional 2 math assessments. So those are Regents exams or department approved alternatives, 1 science, and now they need 1 life and 1 physical science assessment. And then they must also complete that sequence. And remember, if a student is exempt from the world language credit requirement for their IEP, they're also exempt from that sequence requirement. This is just a reminder about admission to Regents exams. So any student who's had the opportunity to complete a course of study, and that means they were enrolled in it from the beginning to the end, it doesn't mean that they passed it. It just means they completed the course, whether successfully or not, that leads to a Regents exam has the right to be admitted into that exam. And we cannot bar our students from a Regents exam for disciplinary reasons or because their achievement is deemed to be unsatisfactory. The only case where we have an additional requirement for admission into the Regents exam is science, where students must also meet that laboratory requirement, which includes the 1,200 minutes of laboratory experiences. The Regents exam schedules are here if needed. And the department did announce in May the cancellation of the U.S. History and Government Regents exam due to content on the exam, which could be traumatic for students in the wake of what happened in Buffalo. So the FAQ is here, which briefly addresses some questions. Today, the exemption from the Regents exams was approved by the department. So the language of the eligibility conditions that students must meet in order to earn the exemptions will be there. I'm not sure if we'll be creating another FAQ for this or not, but it is in the Regents item, and I can forward that to you as well. But essentially, it will be the same conditions that we used for the exemptions due to COVID. So if a student has passed the course or earned credit in the course and was intending to take the U.S. History Regents exam in June of 2022, August of 2022, or January of 2023, they will be exempt from the assessment requirement. Any questions before we swing into the appeals? Okay. So this is just the traditional appeal eligibility criteria. And note that for this school year and next school year, students will most likely not need to rely on these traditional appeal options because the special appeal will be more beneficial to them. So traditionally, if a student was seeking an appeal to graduate with a lower score on a Regents exam, they must have taken the Regents exam under appeal twice. They must have a score in the appealable range. So for all students, that's a score of 60 to 64. For our students with disabilities who are seeking the local diploma, that's 52 to 54. And then for our English language learners who are seeking an appeal on the English Regents only, that's 55 to 59. For these traditional appeals, students must take advantage of academic help provided by the school. They must pass the course for which the appeal is being sought, and then they must be recommended for an exemption to the graduation requirement, either by their teacher or by the department chairperson. This highlights the traditional appeal options for diplomas that apply to all students. So prior to the special appeals, all students earn a Regents diploma via traditional appeal by meeting the credit requirements, and then they were able to meet the assessment requirements using one successfully appealed Regents exam score in that all student range, which is 60 to 64. Prior to the special appeals, all students could earn a local diploma via traditional appeal by meeting the credit requirements. And now they're meeting the assessment requirements using two successfully appealed Regents exam scores in that range, 60 to 64.
And Melissa, these scores are those standard scores, scaled scores, percentages?
Those are I think it is, okay. I believe it's the scaled score.
Okay.
But let me confirm that with OSA, but I'm pretty sure it's scaled score. And for our students who are English language learners, as long as they have entered the United States in grade 9 or after, and they were classified as an English language learner when they took the Regents exam for the second time, they can use the appeal option for English language learners. This would lead to the local diploma. So students are meeting the credit requirements, they're meeting the assessment requirements using a successfully appealed English Regents exam score in that 55 to 59 range. And now, because that would already lead to the local diploma, they can appeal one additional Regents exam score in the all students range of 60 to 64. Students will, as I said earlier, they probably will not need to rely on these options. The only instance where they might is if they earned a score in this range prior to COVID. So most students, and even in that case, they would have been eligible for an exemption because they hadn't yet earned a passing score. So there will be very limited, if any, need for students to use these appeal options. The safety net options for our students with disabilities, the local diploma, the low pass safety net, again, because students can use exemptions and the special appeals, and those lead to any diploma type, the use of the low pass safety net will be limited if needed at all. But traditionally, students meet the credit requirements and then they meet the assessment requirements using that low pass safety net, which essentially lowers the passing score to a 55. And students can also appeal up to 2 Regents exam scores between 52 and 54. The safety net options do apply to all students with a current IEP, as well as students with a Section 504 plan, as long as it's been documented in their plan. And our students who have been declassified from special education from grades 8 through 12, as long as, again, it's recommended by the CSE.
Melissa, I know that you said that these are local decisions for the most part, as far as what's offered. If there was one ask that I could make that be put under consideration, it would be that the Regents score is not included as part of the grade for the course, because despite that being highly encouraged, it still continues to be the practice in many schools. And then the students are not only having the problem with their with their credit requirements, but with meeting the assessments, but with the credit requirements, because they're not passing the class because they're using the very low Regents scores as part of their grades.
Right. Yeah, you have probably seen, we've had numerous memos and guidance that says we do not require or recommend the inclusion of Regents exam scores in the final course averages. But ultimately, those grading policies are determined by each school or district. So we can keep recommending, but at the end of the day, it is their decision unless the Board of Regents decides to change that.
Yeah, it's just very difficult for students with disabilities to have that score included, because then they don't meet the credit requirement as well.
I'm starting to hear from counselors that more and more schools are starting to take that out of the computation for their final course averages. So hopefully we are making some progress in the right direction.
That's nice to hear. Thank you.
Sure. So in yellow here, the compensatory safety net option, this option could possibly be used this year and next year. The issue with it is students have taken so few Regents exams that they may not have one to pull up the lower score. So students would meet the credit requirements, and then they're meeting the assessment requirements by compensating Regents exam scores in the 45 to 54 range. That can be applied to any required Regents exam except for the English and the math. And then they would compensate it with a score of 65 or higher on another Regents exam that's required for the diploma. But like I said, there have been so few Regents exams taken that it may be a long shot for kids to have earned that score of 65 or above. But this would still be an option available to students for a score in that 45 to 50 range, or 49 range, 45 to 49, if they have that score of 65 or above. And this just highlights the use of the compensatory safety net. Sometimes there are questions about whether or not the points need to average to 65. It's really just a one-to-one correspondence. So 2 questions you can ask yourself if you're considering the compensatory safety net. Are the students' ELA and math Regents exam scores 55 or above, or did they successfully appeal scores in that 52 to 54 range? If that is a yes, then you can go to the second question. For every required Regents exam score between 45 and 54, is there a compensating score of 65 or above? And if the answer is yes to both, then the student has met the assessment requirements for the local diploma using the compensatory safety net option. Superintendent determination of a local diploma is an option that is only available to our students with individualized education programs. So it's not applicable to our students with 504 plans or our declassified students. The student must have participated in and passed all the relevant Regents level coursework. They must have actively participated in all required Regents exams. They must have earned the appropriate 22 units of diploma credit. If the request involves English or math assessments, then the students must also earn the CDOS. And so this is where that 4th role of CDOS comes into play. And then we also need the written request for the superintendent to make their determination for the local diploma by the student's parent or person in parental relation. Essentially, the superintendent determination option was built for students who are demonstrating their proficiency in the coursework, but they're not able to earn passing or appealable scores on the Regents exams. Any questions before we move ahead? Okay, this is what you came for. So here we're really going to highlight the newer options. So these are the exemptions due to COVID, which you're familiar with. Students do have some flexibility in meeting the science laboratory requirements. If they were waived from the lab requirement during the 1920 or 2021 school years, including those summer sessions, that waiver remains in place. So any minutes that they missed due to COVID, that were waived due to COVID, remain waived. And if a student was deemed to have met the requirement during those school years, they can continue their admission into the Regents exam. While there's no extension of that flexibility in terms of number of minutes for this school year, we have extended the flexibility where students can meet the requirement through a combination of hands-on and simulated lab experiences. This just highlights the exemptions due to COVID. We need to keep reminding people that these exemptions do not go away. If a student was granted an exemption from an exam, they're not required to pass that specific Regents exam or another exam in lieu of it to meet the diploma requirements. Exemptions can be applied to any diploma type, the local, the Regents, or the Regents with advanced designation, and they do remain with our students through their graduation. Parents do have the right to decline exemptions if a student is now eligible to graduate due to an exemption due to COVID. The parent can decline that exemption to allow their child to continue their education. If a student's IEP states that the graduation date was beyond a date that the student is now eligible for graduation due to an exemption due to COVID, the school cannot confer that diploma until they receive in writing the confirmation from the parent saying that they would like the diploma to be conferred. So if a parent is deciding whether or not to decline an exemption, they must understand that that decision is irrevocable, and the student won't be eligible to graduate until they meet all the graduation assessment requirements, including the one that they were previously eligible for the exemption from, but the parent has declined. Parents can decline one exemption. They wouldn't have to decline every exemption that the student has received. And we also want to make sure, again, that our families know about the educational entitlement for their kids. Our special appeal. So this information just came out last month. If a student meets the eligibility conditions seen here, they can use the special appeal to earn a diploma with a lower score on a Regents exam. So the Regents exam must have been taken during the 21-22 or 22-23 school years. So that's 5 administration dates since January was canceled. So if they took the Regents exam in June or August of 2022, January, June, or August of 2023, and also earned a score in that range of 50 to 64 on the Regents exam that was taken during one of those 5 administration periods, and also passed the course for which the appeal is being sought, then if the superintendent grants the special appeal, they can use that and apply it as considered as a passing score to any diploma type. When the school is making a determination about whether a student is eligible to apply for a special appeal, the grade that's earned on the Regents exam cannot be included in that calculation of the course average. So you see that asterisk here because there are instances where a student could fail the course using the Regents exam, and I think they're not eligible. They didn't pass the course. We need to make sure that that Regents exam score is excluded for the purposes of the eligibility for special appeal. So what makes this special? Unlike the traditional appeal options, this is a limited rule. Students do not need to take the exam under special appeal twice. They don't need to have participated in that additional academic assistance. The special appeals can be applied to any diploma type, so students could not traditionally earn advanced designation with a traditional appeal, but they can use special appeals for any diploma type. And the special appeals don't count towards the maximum number of appeals that can be applied to either the local or Regents diplomas. So students would still have the option to apply the 1 or 2 traditional appeal options to those diploma types. There is no maximum number of special appeals that could be granted. So we get a lot of hypotheticals. Hypothetically, a student could use 5 special appeals to meet the assessment requirements for a Regents diploma. There is a memo and an FAQ, which are both linked to the slide as well. The appeal approval process mirrors the process for traditional appeals. It's exactly the same. The appeal can be submitted by the student, parent, or person in parental relations, or a teacher or a counselor. Once it's submitted, it goes to the appeal committee, which should be comprised of the principal as chair, 3 teachers, not including the student's teacher, and then 1 additional administrator. They will review the eligibility conditions and make their recommendation to the superintendent, who determines to either grant or deny the appeal. So this is not something that is approved by the state education department. It's approved locally by the school or district. This just highlights reporting the special appeal, probably not super important for you, but we just want to make sure that people understand that the approval of the special appeal doesn't change the student's score on the Regents exam, but students can choose to have either the earned score or an SA recorded on their transcript, and the schools will report it both through the SERS and the BEDS form. And here's our special determination. So this was just approved by the Board of Regents this morning. So this is brand new. To be eligible for the special determination of a local diploma, the student must have otherwise met all the requirements for graduation in June of 2022. So this will apply only to those students who are graduating in June, and they must meet one of these two criteria that you see here. So they were enrolled in a course of study or a makeup program during the school year, which intended to lead to a June 2022 Regents exam. They earned credit in the course before the scheduled date for the Regents, and they participated in the exam, but they didn't achieve a passing score. Excuse me. And they also didn't qualify for the special appeal option. So essentially, they were ready to graduate. They needed one Regents exam score. They scored below that 50. The superintendent can make the special determination for the local diploma. And likewise, if the student was intending to take the Regents exam in order to earn their diploma in June, but they weren't able to participate in the exam due to illness, which includes isolation due to COVID, student two could, the superintendent could make a special determination for that student's local diploma as well. All right, I'm going to pause. Questions?
I was just gonna say, I appreciate you describing the safety nets and things as like that the special appeals is kind of trumping that for the next couple of years. I hadn't really thought about it that way.
Yes,
So that's really helpful in my mind.
there is a question that alludes to that in the FAQ as well. And we have been receiving some questions. So we do want to make sure that schools know it is more beneficial for kids to use that special appeal option. I apologize for the tickle in my throat. It does not want to go away. So this slide is just a nice summary of the endorsement and seals options that are available to students. And it also shows you which diploma type they can be added to. So the technical endorsement, students are completing a department approved CTE program and earning that technical endorsement on any diploma type. The seal of civic readiness, again, it's italicized because it's piloted this school year, but that can also be applied to any diploma type. The seal of biliteracy can be applied to either the Regents or the Regents with advanced designation. Similar to the seal of civic readiness, there is a process that schools must follow to be able to confer this seal. But I hear it's a fairly simple one, and it recognizes students' communication skills in multiple languages. And we also have the honors endorsement, which can be added to either the Regents or the Regents with advanced designation. Traditionally, that demonstrates the students' mastery of the content on the Regents exams, and they must earn a 90 or better, a computed average of 90 or better on the Regents exams that are required for the diploma type. And we do have some additional conditions now with the exemptions due to COVID. And then the mastery in math or science can only be applied to the advanced diploma. Students have to earn scores of 85 or better. And again, we have some flexibility there because of all the exemptions that have been granted. So here you see the options for the honors endorsement. This is probably one of the most complicated things that came out of the amendments due to COVID. It was determined that if a student has a minimum of 3 earned scores applicable to the diploma type, we would remove the exemptions due to COVID and just compute the average of those earned scores. And if it was a 90 or above, the student will earn mastery. And then if the student has fewer than 3 earned scores, students could use the final course grade for any exempted Regents exam in that computation for the honors endorsement. So now if the computed average of both the earned scores and the final course averages for those courses for which they were granted an exemption from is 90 or above, students would earn that honors endorsement. And here you see the mastery endorsement. The first eligibility condition is the traditional condition. Kids had to pass 3 math or 3 science regents exams with an 85 or better to earn either mastery in math or mastery in science. Students do need to meet the assessment requirements for the advanced diploma as well. And then the second condition was added after the first round of exemptions. So now students had to pass 2 math and or 2 science regents exams with that 85 or better and have an exemption from a 3rd regents exam in either math or science. And then finally, last year we added the 3rd condition because those exemptions continued, where students could pass 1 math or 1 science regents exam with that 85 or better and have 2 exemptions from regents exams for which they had a final course average of 85 or better. I know we are running short on time here, so I'm going to go through these quick and hopefully have some time for questions. So the out-of-state transfer student exemptions allow schools to exempt students from certain regents exam requirements if they enter a New York State high school in grade 11 or grade 12. So if a student enters in grade 11 for the first time or comes back to a New York State high school after being enrolled for 3 or fewer semesters, they can be exempt from the global history and geography regents exam. They would, in that case, need to pass the US history regents exam. And this essentially takes away that pathway option. So if it's not beneficial for kids to utilize that exemption, they do not have to use it, but it's there if it's helpful for them. And then for our students who enter in grade 12 or re-enter after being enrolled for 3 or fewer semesters, they can be exempted from both the global history regents and the science regents requirements. So they would have to pass ELA 1 math and the US history. The Interstate Compact allows students who are transitioning due to military transfer to use assessments in lieu of the regents exam. So this is pretty broad for these kids. It's exit and end of course exams that are required for graduation in the sending state, national norm referenced achievement tests, and then end of course local exams. There is an attestation form that needs to go from the sending principal to the New York State principal, and that is available on our Interstate Compact webpage. 2 exiting credentials. We've already discussed the CDOS, but it's here if you need it. If it's being awarded as an exiting credential only, it cannot be issued until the student has attended school for at least 12 years, excluding kindergarten, or has reached the age of 21. And then we also have the Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential, which is for our students with disabilities who are assessed using the New York State Alternate Assessment. So these are our students with severe disabilities. Both of these credentials must be accompanied with documentation of the student's skills and strengths. And this again can be issued only after the student has attended school for at least 12 years, excluding kindergarten, or has reached the age of 21. We do have some guidance about schools having local graduation policies that allow students to participate in graduation ceremonies with their cohort, even if they're continuing on beyond that year. And that especially applies to our students who are earning those exiting credentials. Just some additional resources. We will be updating this, but this is a 1-pager that explains the credit and the assessment requirements. And then the second is more of a narrative form. If you're looking for a specific diploma type, you can go right to that section and find the requirements that are needed for that diploma. And here we have our resources for students and families. We're also working on a flyer related to special appeals. And now we'll stick some information about the special determination option in there as well. The tracking tool that you see in the middle is a great resource for students and families. It's an editable PDF and they can go in and type the requirements that they've met so far, and then they have a nice visual of what remains. And then the presentation materials that you see at the end are really intended to provide a facilitation guide and presentation slides for schools to provide a presentation for students and families. And this is hopefully a one-stop shop for all your diploma and graduation resources. You see there's information about the cancellation of the US History Regents exam at the top there. We'll be adding more information after today's Board of Regents meeting. And I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see you and answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Melissa. This was so helpful. My next questions are, it's a little directed towards you, a little towards, is Tina still on? Did Tina leave? Okay. Then my people who I have left. So Jason, Noel. So Donna and I have been going through our, so we as a TAP produce professional development materials that transition specialists and faith centers use across the state. The problem is, by the time we develop it, it goes through review. We've had all of these changes. For instance, the one that just happened yesterday that we haven't even heard about yet. So I'm so
Yes.
thankful that we had this today. The problem is, by the time we go, Donna and I have just gone through what we thought was your most current slide deck and training on your website. And there were slides on here that I think, oh, we need to add this, this, and this. So we always feel like we are behind the mark. And then the people that we're giving our PD packages to are upset because our information is outdated. Their audience members will say, oh, well, that's not accurate anymore. And that's embarrassing.
Right.
What I don't know, and so some of the people have actually said, you know, this is the package that gives me the most anxiety. It's embarrassing when people point out that we don't have the latest materials, this and that. So again, just like the decision that was made yesterday, I don't know if we're not on the right listserv, because I will get something from OSC, or NYSED, but it will be days after I've already heard it from the field that a change has
Yes.
happened. So is there a better listserv we need to be on? One. Two, when we get the questions, such as, well, one of the ones that you said, yes, I'll get back to you on that. Right now, we kind of have this chain where we will hear of questions. Then I ask Tina, then Tina has to send an email to you. Months can go by before regions can get an answer. So I don't know if there's a better contact that we could send people to. My other question, and I think this is the one that just kind of keeps going in my head, and I wish Tina was here, is, you know, I loved your presentation. I loved your slide deck. It was so informative. And obviously you have more background information, especially on the new things coming out, than
Yes.
we do. Do you do a standard presentation? Is there a calendar we could refer our specialists to? Because people are always wanting more information on this. But to be quite honest, like I said, you presented some things that I didn't know about before today.
Right.
And I think that's my biggest concern with us trying to offer this information, is that we don't have the latest information. And I don't.
This, like, the past few years have been so unusual. It wouldn't normally change as rapidly as it is. You are 100% free to reach out to me anytime directly. I also have like a quarterly update group where I'll share information. We don't have, like, you mentioned your PD package. We don't have anything like that.
Well, I mean, like I said,
So-
we basically try to take your slide deck and put as
Which is
many
fine with
super
me.
notes as possible. But like I said, I mean, Donna and I had just gone through what we thought was the latest, and now we need to, as soon as you send me this slide deck, we need to go through it again.
Yep, I was thinking, I'm like, this is a new slide. I don't think we saw this one.
Yeah.
And we haven't even turned it in for OSC to review yet. And
Right.
there have been changes.
And I can just share that historically, that's why we focused more on the requirements as they affected students with disabilities specifically,
Right.
with the hope and expectation and understanding that school counselors and there are other school personnel, administrators who are more well-versed in this information, as they should be, who the participants should be relying on. As you mentioned, you get a lot of hypothetical questions. We used to
Yes.
get those as transition specialists all the time. And that's when, we would say you'd have to go, first of all, we'd be doing an injustice to any student without all of the information to try to address that question. And that really it's up to the LEA to provide that information. We're just trying to give you the broad strokes around the students for disabilities. So I don't know where that leaves us, but your presentation was amazing. I thank you
Yes.
for it, but I'm amending my 3 because I used to be a 3 and now I feel more like a 1.5 to 2, not because of you, but just because so much has changed.
Yes.
And I have to say, I was thinking as we were going through that because this special appeal, right, for the next 2 years is going to be the go-to. Do we have our PD package that's going through all the fine nitty gritties on the safety nets and does that focus need to shift a little bit for whatever packages we're using for the next couple of years? Because why are we giving all of that detail, right? When there's really something that kind of trumps that at this point.
Right.
I felt that way with you today. And I also shared like a refresher for my team here at the Office of Standards and Instruction. And I wondered if I should even be including some of that. I just didn't want it to get lost. So that's why I kept it. But I think you're right that.
But I don't
not
know that
necessarily relevant right now, given
now.
the
Right.
climate that we're living in. And my heart is breaking right now for families trying to understand this on
Right.
behalf of their students.
And
Because
Noelle,
we're all professionals and we're
Which
so
is
confused.
Right.
Which is why I'm thinking, Kathy, are we making it more complicated than it needs to be by including all of that other information when the special appeals is a little more straightforward and less overwhelming?
And Jason and Noelle, when it comes to things like that, again, just like, we just heard that there were changes as of yesterday. Is there a way, instead of waiting for our entire package to come out, when we do know of these changes, that we could do a mass email to the partnership noting those changes? Because we just, we don't have a mechanism to give that information until our package has gone all the way through.
Yeah, we can ask Tina, but I'm sure that's, if there's anything major like that.
Okay.
We can certainly
Melissa,
ask.
Melissa, plug your ears for a second.
Okay.
What I want to say is we don't always know about the changes right away either.
Okay.
So
Okay. And then, like I said, people get so upset with us when they're like, well, your package is out of date. I'm like, okay, well, this is the first I've heard of it. I apologize. The other question I had, and Noelle and Jason, I know you look at our packages a lot right now. We were trying to add it. So in the package that was your latest on the website, there were, I don't know if you'd really call it a case study, but you had these little scenarios and questions. And we wanted to do some things like that involving special ed. And I'll be the first to admit, our last package that went through, there were just a couple of things that honestly we missed and the people reviewing our package missed. And I really feel like in order to do that and do it well, someone from your office, I would love for them to kind of glance at what we create is, again, they kind of mimic what your last package did with here's the little scenario, and I know that would probably have to run by Tina as well for the rest of you. And again, it's just kind of a check for us. If Jason, Noelle, if you think that's something that we could do.
We would definitely have to ask Tina.
Okay.
yeah, and I just know that if any conversations that you have with any other SED offices that we have to be included, you have to go through us
Right.
for that. So,
Yes, I
yeah.
completely understand. And I just, again, not that anybody wants to add an extra layer onto the review process, but for this specifically, it would make me feel better. And because just like you said, Jason, sometimes you guys don't even know about some changes. And
that's the truth. Sometimes we don't hear about it right away too. So
okay.
And
What-
as I had kind of expressed, in this particular area, you can hear all of that information, and if you don't have an example to illustrate it, it's almost meaningless.
Mhm.
Right? Like people who are hearing this information, they need to say, okay, so this is like the criteria and here's an example. And it, you don't get the meaning without the example.
I do have some scenarios that I used with my team that I would certainly be comfortable sharing with you if you think that would
Wonderful,
be
thank you.
helpful.
Are any special education related?
Yep,
Perfect. Oh, that would be fantastic. That would be great. And you don't mind sending your PowerPoint to us?
no, not at all.
Okay. And for all of our nice people on the call, I still don't know what to do with the bigger conversation around, you were mentioning quarterly updates, Melissa, on.
Yeah, so I could invite a representative to come and join me, and then they could share the information forward.
Oh, that would be
Would that be Tina?
fantastic. I
That
know
would be
Tina,
really helpful.
I would
right?
ask Tina and then she could probably
Okay.
assign
Perfect.
somebody.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
And you mentioned you are signed up for a listserv. Do you know?
It's the general NYSED listserv where when we get the information, there's several bullet points. But again, sometimes people in the field who we're presenting to already know the information by the time it gets
Okay.
in our hands. And I don't know if there's a better listserv, maybe, or if there's a specific curriculum and instruction listserv.
There is, I don't know that it will be faster because it does have to go through like the P20 weekly. So
Okay.
it's not necessarily going to be faster, but you can request updates specific to diploma requirements.
Okay.
I'm going to stick a link in the chat here
Thank you.
and other areas as well. but-
Okay. Thank you so much. If everyone will click subscribe here on this. And that way we can all share the information. And I feel like I should make my list of questions, or Noel, Jason, can you ask some of our questions if you get to Tina first? On the whole, could we send an email blast out as soon as we do find out the information? Otherwise, I don't know how we would ever have an accurate PD package for this. So
Hoping it will be more static moving forward, but not going to say that for certain.
well,
So-
yes, okay.
I'm sorry, but when I'm looking at, I hit subscribe here and I see content areas, but I don't see one to sign up for that's for diploma and credential.
Oh, that's
option.
true. It's art.
Am I missing it,
CTE,
or-
counselors?
It would be counselors.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And that's another question, Melissa. So a lot of our audience when we do this is often counselors. Do
Mhm.
counselors have a different mechanism to receive this information? Do they?
See, we don't have like a statewide system or schedule of meetings. So it's really by request. So sometimes like the video that you watched, the suggestion actually came up at one of the quarterly meetings to have a presentation like that. So we recorded it and made it available for others to see. But other than that, it's usually like BOCES or districts that will reach out for an update and will provide the update.
See, and that's another concern that I have, because the schools that we focus on working on in this partnership, and appropriately so, are those who are persistently struggling and have lots of systemic issues. And in systems like that, those
Yeah.
kinds of outreach are not being made. And
Right.
they're the ones whose students could benefit most from the information, but there isn't the background foundation of knowledge that we know is so necessary to understand this complicated material. So
And they're too
not a
overwhelmed. to
question.
ask.
Yeah, it's just, I'm processing it all at the same time, and I'm thinking about some of the school districts that I've worked with, and their counselors, are not as up to speed as some of the ones in our higher end schools that are able to absorb the information and reach out for help. And I
Right.
don't have an answer necessarily, like I'm just thinking out loud, forgive me.
And
You're making me realize that I need to do a better job making sure that I am reaching all and not just those who ask.
Please, this is, I think what you're doing is great. I'm
It's
wondering,
amazing.
how or where there's an obligation on the school administrators as the
Mhm.
instructional leaders
Right.
to make sure that their staff is aware of this information and these changes, et cetera, and that it isn't falling to just, again, now I'm speaking as a former special ed director, to one department to be responsible to know how to get our most, struggling students through, to be
Yes.
able to exit with a diploma, at least a local diploma that can be more meaningful to them in their post-school outcomes. And again, it has to be a systems issue, for general ed administrators, not just for the director of special ed or, our partnership to address. It's
Well,
just too big.
and I'm just talking out loud, Kathy. So again, I have no authority to propose this, but again, just a general, and Noel, Jason, let me know. Just like you said, Kathy, we are working with the schools that are in need. So I even wonder if once a year we could, something that we're supposed to do more, it is across TAP. So we have TAP for behavior, TAP for academics, and graduation and diploma goes across everything, right?
Yeah.
So I even wonder once a year if we could invite you or your office to do a presentation, not just to us, but basically our entire partnership, FACE centers, and everyone could advertise it to get as many viewers as possible, that if
Mhm.
nothing else, once a year, we were
walk
doing
through the
that. So it
diploma
wasn't
program.
hit and miss. Because the other issue that we are running into, because our specialists are not comfortable giving this information because they often don't know the latest and greatest, that they often just won't offer the training
Mm.
because they're not comfortable. Even we can create the package, but they'll avoid it because
Right.
they can't answer all the questions. And I don't know, Jason, Noel, I mean, we don't have a true cross, well, we have a cross-tap deliverable, but it doesn't necessarily include reaching out where basically our specialists could advertise to the EOs that they're working with that they could join this webinar. We've just never done anything like that, and I don't know if it's against anything, but
Our only goal is to make sure as many people and students and families as possible have the
Yeah.
information they need to be able to exit
Yep.
school with a meaningful, outcome.
I just think it would be a huge asset, but I don't know. Jason,
I'm
what do
gonna
you
leave
think?
that decision to you,
Sure,
but
yeah, I mean, yeah, like I said,
Yeah.
I have no
certainly
authority.
willing to join you if it's possible.
I mean, the short answer to your question, Amber, is that, we'd have to run it by
Sure,
Tina. You know that.
Okay, I do.
Yeah.
But I guess you could tell me if you knew that would be a definite no-go for some reason that I don't know about.
I'm not 100% certain
Okay.
on that, so I can't give you a firm answer either way.
Okay.
So
All right. All right. Well, Melissa, thank you so
Thank you so much.
This was absolutely
yeah,
wonderful.
thanks, Melissa.
Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Care.